Yeah, EFF does a great deal of work in the area of copyright. And in fact, it was kind of EFF's work in copyright that first sort of brought me to EFF. Before I worked at EFF, I worked for an organization called Creative Commons that you're familiar with.
They provide free for public use images, well, videos also, or no?
Yeah, well, they don't provide that material by and large, but what they provide is the kind of legal framework for sharing it.
Gotcha.
These licenses that say anyone can use this material as long as you do X, Y, Z.
I know that there's some websites out there that provide, I'll just use images as the example, but they'll say, you know, anything on this website or in this section or whatever it is under Creative Commons, which means it's free to use.
Right, right. And I mean, we could talk about the different types of Creative Commons licenses. There are 6 different licenses that each have kind of slightly different rules about, about what people can do with that material. And sometimes those things get just unfortunately sort of lumped together, and there's this idea that, oh, just Creative Commons means you can do whatever with it, when in fact, like some of the licenses have a requirement that you can't use it commercially, and like there are some restrictions and things. But it was while I was at CC that I started thinking a lot about copyright as a kind of public policy issue. And EFF was definitely one of the organizations that I admired as being kind of on the vanguard of that. Here is when a friend of mine asked, why is copyright important? Like, why is it so important that it is a thing that EFF devotes a lot of work to? My response to that was, because copyright is increasingly used as a tool of censorship. And if you care about people being able to speak out freely on the internet, then you need to recognize copyright's history as a tool for silencing people. And I'll give you, this is by no means the most treacherous example of that, but this is a pretty good example that shows how copyright can be exploited for the purposes of censoring certain speech. There was, as a part of a few years ago in San Francisco, there was a citizens initiative. I don't even remember the details of it exactly, but having to do with Airbnb and other kinds of apartment sharing apps. There were people trying to pass an initiative to make it harder, I think, to have like just a dedicated Airbnb apartment that doesn't have any permanent tenants in it. And like, for the record, I have no opinion or position about that measure. But somebody made this ad that they put online, and they put on local TV channels and things, that used this sort of short parody of Hotel California by the Eagles. They called it Hotel San Francisco. Again, we were talking earlier about fair use. This was just very, very obviously fair use.
What was
this use of the Eagles song, or the use of, I wouldn't even call it the Eagles song. I'd call it more like a sound-alike in the ad. It's just like, it's fair use. But the way that the Digital Millennium Copyright Act works is that the rights holder went to YouTube and said, you have to take this video down because it's copyright infringement. What happens after that is that the uploader, if they want, sends a counter notice that says, no, this is not copyright infringement. And then the copyright holder has, I think it's 10 days in order to sue the person for copyright infringement. And if they don't sue the person for copyright infringement, then the video can go back up. They sent this takedown notice a week before the election.
What do you mean the takedown notice?
They sent this takedown notice to have the video removed from YouTube.
Oh, so all they had to do was file a counter and wait it out?
Right, but that's the period of time when the speech was important.
Right. Oh, so they have to take it down during that time.
Right. So very clearly the purpose was just to have it be down during the time when it was intended for people to watch it. And these are, in issues of copyright infringement and in other sorts of issues having to do with online speech too, be it defamation or whatever it is, you have to very carefully look at the ways in which reporting and takedown mechanisms can be abused. Otherwise, you risk doing more harm than good.
Can you talk about, I think it's the EU that is proposing a law where, what is it? Social media platforms or websites have to have some kind of copyrighted material filter or something like that. You can probably explain better than I can.
It's a funny thing because the proponents of Article 13 will say up and down, no, it's not about filters. But when you look at what the proposed law that they're going to be voting on soon says, is that having these copyrighted materials be up on your social media website for any amount of time is illegal.
Holds you liable as the website owner.
Right. There's no way to do that at the scale of a YouTube or a Facebook or whatever without using some kind of copyright filtering system.
What is a copyright filtering system?
The most kind of readily available example that most people are sort of familiar with is on YouTube. If you've ever tried to go to a YouTube video and instead gotten the little frowny face version of the YouTube logo that says this video has been removed due to copyright infringement. So here, I'll try to explain at least a little bit of how this works. A second ago, I was talking about the DMCA notice and takedown system, where I have something online that you say infringes your copyright. You can tell the platform to take it down, and then they do, and then I can file a counter notice. And then if you don't actually sue me for copyright infringement, then the platform can put it back up. That's how it's supposed to work under the law. What YouTube and increasingly other platforms have done too is they've kind of added an extra step that happens before that process, where you have uploaded all of your music to YouTube's copyright filtering system, and I upload a video that might have a bit of your music in the background of it. You can set with YouTube specific instructions about whether you want it completely removed, whether you want it demonetized if I'm getting ads on it, whether you want it monetized and then the money going to you.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so YouTube has created these features for reasons that make a certain amount of sense from a business perspective, that they want to court favor with the big media companies. There was a period of time before Content ID when YouTube was the object of a lot of criticism by those companies, and it still is to a certain extent. And YouTube wanted to develop those partnerships with all of the big movie studios and all of this stuff, so that they really developed this system as a favor to Hollywood. Now, and this is most immediately happening in the EU, but it's going to be happening in the US as well. People are saying that this thing that YouTube kind of voluntarily did is what all platforms should have to do. And so if you run any kind of website that hosts user-generated content, that everything that gets uploaded has to go through this bot that determines whether it's allegedly copyright infringement or not. YouTube, again, like, because everybody is kind of familiar with Content ID, it's a good encapsulation of some of the problems here. If you go on our website, you can see we have this whole section called the Takedown Hall of Shame that includes in it some really, really weird things that have happened where Content ID essentially had false positives. There is one of my favorite examples, just because it's so ridiculous, is, you know how sometimes people make like sounds that you can use just for like listening to while you go to sleep or whatever?
Like white noise.
Yeah. So there's this 5-hour white noise video that received 10 different Content ID strikes there were 10 different songs and things in the YouTube filter that this filter believed were copyright infringement. These systems are not perfect, and Google is the best at developing these kind of systems. So moving from where we are now, where it's this voluntary thing that YouTube and Facebook and other companies do kind of as a favor to Hollywood, moving to this system where literally every site that hosts user-generated content has to use these copyright filters, it's going to result in a lot of speech being unintentionally taken down. And then there's this whole other side to it, too, having to do with competition. It's already very, very hard to compete with Facebook and YouTube and Twitter for a lot of different reasons. But creating this situation in which any startup would have to build or license something like Content ID in order not to have this huge amount of potential liability for copyright infringement of its users is going to close out the market.
To only the remaining players.
Right. We're at this weird time now where a lot of the protections, and this is both applies to copyright as well as to 230 other kinds of speech issues. These protections that have allowed Twitter and Facebook to get to their place of dominance. We're now at this point where taking away some of those protections would do far more harm to anyone trying to compete with those companies than it would do to those companies.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the episode. If you're interested in contributing to the conversation and supporting the show, there's 2 easy things you can do. 1, click subscribe, and 2, visit our Patreon page where you get exclusive access to the Exploring Minds community.